I was labeled as the mad girl. Whenever you talk about mental health, they're gonna be like, bro, me not go to hospital. I don't want to go there. I don't need to see a doctor. I'm okay. We cannot keep going around trying to diagnose everybody. Everywhere you scroll on social media, you're calling people narcissists, you're calling people psychotic because they disagree with you. What they considered as mental health challenges is the fact that we rebelled against their system.
JP, woo, better wake up. Better shake up, shake up.
I wanna wake up.
So greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Evolve With Liv, where we strip back, dig, and have these deep talks. And today we're starting from the beginning about what is mental health. So it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and while the world is posting cute quotes, I want to have some very deep conversation. So let us start with what the powers that be say. So according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. Sounds all right? But then they add something very interesting. Mental health is more than just the absence of mental disorders. Now I want us to pause right there, because that little line, more than just the absence of disease, it sounds like they're progressive, right? And it centers the idea that we're unwell equals having a disorder, but being mentally healthy equates not being sick. And that right there is a colonial framing. So why we really need to talk about this? Why does it matter? You see, when mental health is defined by what it is not rather than what it is, we create a model that is reactive, clinical, and disconnected from our cultural truths. And this Western understanding ignores the fullness of who we really are. It centers pathology and disease over possibility. It's saying you're mentally healthy if there's no madness, without actually talking about the wholeness and what it looks like in our lived experience. So as a Black Caribbean woman, no, I didn't just go by what WHO says. I have asked my own people, my family and friends, and even people online. I've paid attention. And when you hear the term mental health, what comes to your mind? I want you to comment below and let us know. Because some would say it's feeling at peace. Someone says, being able to function without faking it. And that's important, that stillness in the storm. And just having space to ball. Like, seriously. But not one of them mentioned having disorders. No, that spoke about the presence. They spoke about the peace, the clarity, and the presence of their self. Now, as a Black Caribbean woman, if you're born and raised here, especially from African descent, you would understand that mental health is not just that diagnostic terminology. I conducted a research for my master's. I did a literal review on research that would look at Black Caribbean women who would have survived gender-based violence and what really impacted their mental health. And what they defined it as was resilience, storytelling, and faith. Their narrative spoke power. And I am telling you that the way the world is portraying this narrative of what mental health is something we have to take with a grain of salt. So now that we understand that people don't really think about mental health as this disease in our context, not many persons do, we wonder why there's such a strong in the Black community, the stigma around madness. Why, when you think about mental health, the madness come to play. And we're so, as I said, I did the research, and a lot of the research would show that the Black community has stigma around mental health, and they talk about, the perception of it. But what many didn't disclose in those readings that I found, or those research that I found, is where that came from. Now, I'm that kind of person. I always ask, why? Why is this the problem? I don't just say, okay, yeah, Black people think say mental health is madness, right? Why we think like that, So I know growing up in Jamaica, you see somebody on the street, they will say they're madman, you understand? And normally those persons actually have the pathology the disorders, the disease like psychosis or schizophrenia. And normally those people in the community will tell you that they, you know, took drugs, them kind of splicing weed and put lizard tail in there and all of these things, right? So the person is erratic in their mind, they don't know how to function in society as well. Again, based on the definition I shared earlier, they're not able to cope with the stresses of life, and so their response is just out of order, right? And so they would live on the streets, etc. But what about those of us who are functioning in our day-to-day life and are, quote unquote, when we say we want to go for therapy or we need some mental health intervention, we are considered mad? So, you know, all the time people say like, me not go chat to nobody. After me not go to the hospital, I don't need to go to a doctor. So when you think about the mental health, we always think about, oh, because again, this is the narrative that was sold to us, right? But when I think about our people and where we're coming from, so let's just sit back and take a track. As I said in the other video, and if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead and look about when I said they lied to us. And I said a white man is unable to tell me about mental health care. That's something that I can't learn from my ancestors. Because what did it take for them to be able to maintain such mental resilience in order to survive the slave trade, and then fight for their slavery, and then reproduce and continue to produce? Africa is the most populated place on earth. So after going through all of those atrocities, how is it that our people, our black people, are so strong? And these are the things that are important, because it's not medication. So in the, let me just give you some history. Oh my god, I am so sorry that I was not able to meet this professor from UWI, and I'll insert his name here, Professor Hicklin. I'm telling you, when I read his paper, I was like, wow, finally I found the answer. Because he spoke about the history of mental health in Jamaica, the psychiatry world in Jamaica, and he talked about how the fact that the slave owners had no intent on keeping us healthy, quote unquote healthy, just enough for them to continue to get, you know, work out of the slaves. But when slaves were going against the slave owners, whenever there was a rebellion, whenever there was a riot, when someone spoke up, when you had a voice to say, hey, I'm not doing this, right, they were now locked in the hospital called Bellevue. Because what they considered as mental health challenges is the fact that we rebelled against their system. So you might be saying, but Olivia, that's a far gone. We know say Bellevue is not that. It is not that today, but that narrative is what influences and impacts us today. Why the person, the regular man on the street, is gonna say, hey, whenever you talk about mental health, they're gonna be like, bro, me not go to hospital. I don't want to go there. I don't need to see a doctor. I'm okay. And the fact is, yes, you're okay, because you're not losing it. Sometimes what is mental health care for us in our community is the drumming. Is in Trinidad they will say the liming. We will say we just a chill out, we hang on the corner, we are all the vibes, you understand? It's going to the beach, it's talking to a friend, it's going to church, it's going to that place where you can just bawl your eyes out and chill. That is what mental health is for us. It's not these antidepressants. It is not. And don't tell us that we are not low socioeconomic countries, or the global south has, you know, they're not in the state of handling mental health challenges because of stigma that the same colonial master created, stigma that they don't want to take you know, acceptance for. You understand? So I had to bring that context to you guys for you to understand, when we think about mental health awareness, that we as the educated part of society need to recognize who taught us this information and how we cannot disseminate it to others. We cannot keep going around trying to diagnose everybody. Everywhere you scroll on social media, you're calling people narcissists, you're calling people psychotic because they disagree with you. That is the narrative. That was the exact way this madness narrative and notion was presented by the colonial masters during slavery. You don't agree with someone, then you're mentally ill. No, so that's why you shun away from that. I wouldn't want to say, hey, I'm not mentally well or I'm incapable today, because I don't want to be considered mad, you know. But let me share a very personal story, and I didn't even know I was going to go here. I shared before in the other video that I just told you to go and watch about my suicide. What I didn't tell you was how it played out. So I was attending a boarding school in Jamaica. This boarding school actually was created in 1883, and so hence colonial school. Very British, very posh. We wear the straw hats, we're all that, right? We sit like this, we speak like that, well groomed and all of that. I fell into the order, but there was something deep inside of me that was just not working out. Anyways, I won't get into that. I attempted suicide on that campus, and after going through therapy and learning about serenity prayer, again prayer, because faith is something close to me, my faith is very important to me. I decided, because my psychologist at the time said I would recommend that she goes to another school to start over. It would be best for her. I wasn't prescribed any pills. I walked through some coping skills technique in order for me to manage the difficulties of life like any teenager would need. But when I went back to my school, I chose to go back to this school. I was labeled as the mad girl, Mad Olivia. No, I presented myself in a way to my principal and other senior staff that I am still capable of being the leader that they had chosen. And so I was pinned as a prefect, and I was there carrying out my leadership duties. And in carrying out my leadership duties, people said, but me not listen to that mad girl, yeah? Me not listen to she, but she can't tell me she mad, she a try to kill herself and all of these things. No, again, I can't blame them, because whenever somebody is having any form of mental health array, or your inability to cope with the stresses of life, you know what you're considered in our context? Mad. But again, how did these 10 to 16 year old 17 year old know what that narrative is? Again, I'm telling you guys, it came from the colonial system, from slavery. And we have not stopped to check it out to say, hey, but no, it's not necessarily madness. I said all of that to say, right? It's important for us, again, to question how we get our education and who is really educating us on these things that we tend to believe and hold as truth, and how we perpetuate that into other people's life, especially when we have the role, when we're in a role and we have the responsibility of leadership, of guiding. You're a content creator. We also, like I am, we have to be very careful of the narratives that we're spewing. We need to stop and question these things. So yes, we're all celebrating mental health awareness, and it's important to have an honest conversation about what it is. But what I want us to really get to is, what is that for you? Not what someone else is telling you, but what is mental health for you? So my call to action is that we must decolonize. Again, in the other video, I told you what that meant. So when I talk about decolonizing mental health, it's not just about using big academic words to sound smart, even though I am. It's like, stop pretending that the Western model works for everyone. It doesn't. Let us as Black Caribbean people, as Africans, center our stories, our spirituality. Let us center our strength, those that we have embedded from our ancestors. It's important, and let us embrace our scars. So you want to know what that include? Let us use the bush medicine and the Bible. Let us listen to our auntie without judgment, and our grandmother who really prayed over our pillows, and the silence that has healed you more than the therapy ever did. Let us hold space for both faith and medicine, because both have value when rooted in context and care. That's so important for us to mention. So here's what I'll leave you with. what does mental health mean to you? Not what WHO says, not what the DSM says, not what even I said, but what you, deep in your belly bottom, when the world goes quiet and you ask yourself, am I okay? Mental health isn't just about what's missing, it's about what is present. Peace, safety, faith, rest, and the freedom to feel and still be whole. So this is just the beginning, because we're building a whole series breaking down mental health, because I go into my research on decolonizing global mental health, and I want to go into healing and faith, because this is the faith family. So if this resonated with you, please like, share this with someone else, comment, and of course subscribe. Drop in the comments below what's your definition of mental health. I really want to hear from you. So I am Olivia Shaw Lavelle, and this is Evolve with Liv. We talk about the things nobody want to talk about.
Wake up. Wake up. Wake up.
Wake up.